After 2 full years, Top Gun Maverick is finally gonna hit theaters this weekend. But what do I think about the original Top Gun? Has it aged well? What does it mean to me personally? Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on the original Top Gun. As we go into this, since I know some of my audience is younger, I'm gonna try and not go into specific spoilers since I would like to convince you to watch the film, so I don't wanna spoil the experience of watching it. But as it's a movie I've seen so many times that it's just kind of soaked into me, it's easy for me to forget what would be a spoiler for the film. So just in case, be careful watching this review if you haven't seen Top Gun before, or better yet, just go watch Top Gun real quick and then come and watch my review. And let's get started with my history with Top Gun. And for me, one of my earliest movie watching memories is of watching Top Gun with my family. I recall sitting there and the movie came on, and that just like those early memories where it's kind of confused with the exact location, the time, all that. One of my earliest for me is Top Gun. And in particular, when they get to the love-making scene, and my parents are like, whoa, get out of here. You're not right for that. Kicked me out of the room, like, what's going on? And then got older and I understood what was going on, and oh, okay. I learned something today about that Top Gun movie that I understand now why my parents freaked out a little bit there. But that to me that's one of my early memories of watching films, that thing that kind of led to me doing what I currently do. And even beyond that, we didn't just watch Top Gun, but we also had the soundtrack for Top Gun. And we had it on vinyl, because this was the 80s and the early 90s, and so I had that record and I'd listen to it all the time. So back in the day, I knew every word to every song on the soundtrack for Top Gun. And when I was young, I was stupid and I didn't understand how movies worked. So I just assumed that Tom Cruise sang all the songs on the soundtrack, and then, except for Take My Breath Away, which Kelly McGillis sang. I just assumed that because I was very stupid when I was young. As it turns out, that's not at all how movies work. But so for me, Top Gun has always kind of been one of those movies that's been a part of my life. I don't remember a time when I hadn't seen it. I don't remember a time when I didn't know all the twists and turns. And it's a movie that I've seen a bajillion times. So it's a little bit tough to review a movie that's just kind of been such a big part of your life and shaped your taste in movies, and that's just always been there. How do you separate your love for movies from something that made you love movies, and something that has so many ties to your childhood and things like that? So I'll do the best that I can to give a nice, fair, balanced take on it, while also having my personal experience tied into all of this as well. But let's move on to the good. And I'll just get right to the point. I think that this is an amazing 80s product. And that's a strange way to describe a movie, but I feel like the 80s in particular had such a distinct flair to them that there are a lot of great 80s movies that are specifically great 80s movies. They might not be great movies, but they're great 80s movies. They're great products of their time that are so fun and capture the energy of a decade so well. I'd say the same thing about Rocky IV. Is it great cinema, as Martin Scorsese would say? No, it is not. Is it an amazing 80s film? Absolutely it is. Is it a phenomenal 80s product? Even more so. And that's another movie that back in the day I listened to the soundtrack, the vinyl, all the time. Way back in the day, except I didn't own that one. I had to check it out from the library. But like as a movie, just the mixture of rock and roll, editing, storytelling, pacing, with melodrama, all kind of combined together with this heroism to it. Like all of that just feels like something you could only do in the 80s. The way that they did it, the use of the soundtrack, the fact that Danger Zone plays in the movie roughly 1,000 times, like that whole energy is so 80s. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I say that very much as a good thing, of just like this. If you like 80s movies, especially if you grew up in the 80s and were fond of that decade, this captures that time period so well. Also throw this out there, I like Tony Scott more than Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott maybe is a little bit maybe too intelligent or cerebral or poetic or metaphoric in a lot of his explorations, and he takes a lot of ideas that I should like more or genres that I really like and then starts tackling questions in a manner that I'm just not very interested in. And I feel like Tony Scott kind of just has a certain energy to his movies that I've always kind of liked more. Just generally speaking, I like Tony Scott more than Ridley Scott. And even this movie kind of captures that of just being able to have fun in a way that Ridley Scott doesn't seem to be as able to just have fun making a movie. And Tony was able to, yeah, we're doing this wild, crazy movie about jet fighters that are in competition and they're playing volleyball and there's a love story and there's daddy issues and just let's have fun, let's have big cranked up emotions, let's kind of go for it. And I think Tony was able to do some of that a little bit more than Ridley has been able to. Other thing to talk about with this movie, the cast here is pretty crazy good. And people forget how good the cast here is. And it's very easy to do so because it's so remembered as a Tom Cruise vehicle. Like him as Maverick is so front and center that, yeah, of course, right, Tom Cruise is great. And and Val Kilmer's in it too as Iceman. But then how quickly you forget all of these side actors that became major players throughout the decade or on television that fill out all these other roles. Meg Ryan is an important but small role in the film. You've got Tim Robbins is in the movie, in the intro and the outro of it. Tim Robbins is there, and this guy went on to star in all these movies, in Shawshank Redemption, the 90s. He's in Top Gun. You've got someone like Anthony Edwards that went on to be the star of one of the biggest shows of the 90s. You have Adrian Pasdar is one of the guys that's kind of thrown in there that was one of the stars of Heroes, one of the biggest shows of the Zeros, at least the first season of Heroes was one of the best seasons of the Zeros, and he was one of the stars of that show. And then you have kind of like Tom Skerritt as in there, and Michael Ironside and Tolkien, the bald guy, Skinner from Back to the Future, he's in there, like so many people. And then was it Terrence Gilliard, who went on to be a major actor on Walker, Texas Ranger, and was in Die Hard and a number of other films. And he's in there too. I mean, there's just so many people. And that's where he even brought up Kelly McGillis at the time. It's just an amazing cast. And it just goes to show how powerful Tom Cruise's presence as a movie star was, that you forget all of that because it's just Tom Cruise. Oh, and Val Kilmer. And even then it would be that. Val Kilmer, like this huge movie star of the 80s and 90s, and it's like, yeah, Tom Cruise, of course, just steals everything. That's crazy, the amount of talent in this movie and how much chemistry they have, the right kinds, whether it's Maverick and Goose feeling like two buddies and the brother that Maverick never had. You buy into that. You buy into the competition with Iceman, that they don't seem to like each other. You buy into the fact that all these instructors believe that Maverick has all the talent to be great. The question is, can he control his own worst instincts? Can he get a control of himself, put all that aside, and let the talent come out? You buy all of it. And that's when you have a really strong cast. Of course, this is the jet fighter movie. In the history of cinema, there's one movie that is just so known for being the jet fighter movie, and it's this one. And there's movies with dogfights, and there's movies with as in dogfighting and with planes, and there's of course space battles. But when you come to like good old-fashioned jet fighters, this is the movie. Like, it's the one. And it was a massive hit. It's the sort of thing, like, you'd think there'd be knockoffs. You'd think that there would be all these other movies that would like follow and have some success. No, none of them captured what this one was able to capture. Just a certain energy to it that was distinctly, worked for this film, distinctly successful, Top Gun. and whether it's even the difficulty of capturing those aerial battles, and on the behind the scenes stuff and all the interviews, it's been pretty clear that this was a pretty troubled production where there's a lot of competing vision as to what to do. But then even beyond that, technically speaking, capturing all those dogfights, all the jet fighters and everything, how do you do that? How do you have jets flying around quickly and have it be coherent and exciting? But what shoots all of that? Like, that's not an easy thing to film because they're moving so fast. And so you need something moving just as fast to keep up with them and be in the right spot. And how do you make it coherent? And this is like the one time that kind of happened, that you got jet fights, dog fights with jets that actually worked and panned out and worked and was exciting. I keep saying worked. And it was exciting. Other things in there about you got to talk about with the movie. It's celebrated, for the rock and sock'em side of it, and it's remembered for the take my breath away, the romance. I think it's underappreciated for its importance on its level, on a dramatic level, of you have this guy, Maverick, who has these deep daddy issues that he's trying to prove himself to someone that he can't prove himself to. He's tried to reclaim his family name. He's trying to do all these. He just has such a chip on his shoulder. And he's someone that doesn't have any family, and so he finds family in his co-pilot. And everything that kind of plays out with their relationship and where that kind of heads means a lot. Like, it's significant. There's a weight to it. And people call the movie superficial, it's shallow, but it really is tapping into something about the way that our parents and their legacies and can shape us. And I think it does have a character arc there. There's a journey, there's depth to him. You understand why he's doing what he's doing and why he's reckless and why he can't control some of his worst instincts, though he has such good instincts in another sense. You get it because he's a fleshed out character, and you understand why people react to him the way that they do, that like Iceman is like, can't stand him because he legitimately sees him as a danger. And some of it is personal, and there's moments where he has to like, oh, this isn't personal. And it is a little bit personal, but he brings up concerns that are legitimate, that Maverick can be dangerous and he's irresponsible and he has issues that he needs to work through. That's when you have something that makes sense and has depth to it. Like the characters have worldviews and understandings, dynamics that you understand, and they're relatable and they make sense. So I think when you put it all together, it's this amazing 80s product, the music, the energy, the worldview, all of it. It's like the montages of going to the beach and things like that. You only could have made this in the 80s, but it is one that is entertaining to this day. I think it has more emotional depth than sometimes it gets credit for. And without question, it's a movie that just had so many things that connected with people in that way that's tough to define exactly what it is, but it connected with people, whether the quotes, the energy to it. People fell in love with Maverick, with Goose, and you didn't want Iceman to win, but you understood Iceman. You didn't dislike Iceman for even his issues with our hero. I think that's when you have a movie that just connects in a way that really matters. All that said, I think you have to define it as very much an 80s movie because there's also some things here that don't quite work. So with that said, let's move on to the bad. And I think one of the big ones here is that it's a movie whose tone is kind of all over the place. And sometimes even in the same scene, it's all over the place. And you get this right out of the gate. The opening credits are going and it's playing the amazing anthem. I forgot to mention that. The score here is phenomenal. We talked about the soundtrack, but the score from Harold Faltermeyer, I'm sure I mispronounced that, is just amazing. Just a great, catchy hook. And it's a single instrument anthem. Like you can play it on your guitar and it's instantly recognizable. Just a great anthem melody. So that goes in the good. But anyway, it starts off and that's playing and you got all these shots of the aircraft carrier, and then it like hits a note and then immediately goes dun 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 and shifts on a heartbeat into rock and roll mode. So we're one part anthem, one part 80s rock and roll movie, and it just cuts, just hard cuts. Like these two don't blend together. There's no transition. There's no way to, they're not anything like that. It just goes hard cuts from no, 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 dun, 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 immediately. And that's kind of what the movie can feel like too. We're in the opening sequence, and there's, without going to too many spoilers on this, but you have Maverick battling these MiGs, and he does this whole aerial bit, and does this, there's this ridiculous little bit that's part of the charm of the movie of, plays into the whole plot of this vertical maneuver that he does that involves a camera and a bird. And it goes from that, which is intentionally very silly and shows the jovial nature, and then it just cuts to a guy having a meltdown. Just cuts. And the tone, there's no transition whatsoever. And that's kind of what the movie does a lot of, just hard turns from, yeah, we're having fun, we're playing volleyball, to some totally different energy and vibe. And I think a lot of that comes back to, it was a bit of a troubled production. Like any of the behind the scenes interviews, documentaries, anything like that, you kind of learn that the producers had one thing they wanted to do, and then the writers had something else they wanted to do. They hired Tony Scott kind of based off some commercials he did. He comes in and he wanted to do like Apocalypse Now with jets. He like said, I wanted to do Apocalypse Now with jets. And if you've seen the movie, you know that's like the craziest, weirdest point of reference for Top Gun. What? Apocalypse Now? This is not Apocalypse Now. It's not Apocalypse Now on the page. It's not Apocalypse Now on the screen. Like, what? What script did he read that he was thinking Apocalypse Now? And so you watch the movie and you kind of have these jumps between the competing visions for what they wanted to do. You also, I don't know how true to what extent this is, but Ridley Scott joked that he was fired multiple times during the making of the movie, where they saw what he was doing and they went, I don't think that's it, cowboy, and you need to stop. You're doing too much slow-mo, you're fired. But he just didn't leave. He kept shooting. And they're like, fine, we'll keep you. And then they kept firing him. He's joked that that's what happened. To what degree it's true, I don't know. But there's something that did happen where they were not crazy about what he was doing. And thus, there was friction between him and the producers and the writers as well. And so thus you have a movie where there's kind of this hard cuts in energy. And it was also technically a very troubled or difficult production because they were trying to make a movie that with these exciting aerial battles, and nobody knew how to shoot that. And so they've said every single shot that was usable of the jets fighting is in the movie. There's no more of it. They went through every single shot to try and find it, because the early cuts, people were like, I had no idea what was going on. I guess Tony Scott had drawn out storyboards, and they tried to do those, and they cut it to the storyboards, and it didn't make any sense. So they had to go back to the drawing board, recut everything, rework everything to try and make something coherent that you could follow because of the limitations of shooting jet fighters moving at crazy speeds and flying by each other. So factor all of that in, and you kind of have a movie that just has some issues. And they also did some late reshoots to try and amp up certain plot lines. And you have segments where, like, there's an elevator scene where Maverick's hair's all wet and kind of a different style than normal, like just falling down. And then Kelly's wearing a hat all of a sudden. And it's because it was a reshoot. They realized they needed to touch up the love story and put more weight and depth to it. So they did these reshoots, and she already had different hair color, different hairstyle, because she was working on a different movie, and he looked a little different too. And so they just had to, stuff like that to like this movie just barely was able to squeak in to work. And I think you see that. Like that's on screen, that the issues that kind of went on with the film. And that's almost, in another sense, to its credit of how good the movie was, or whatever the magic to this film was, that despite a troubled production, despite some issues with the tone, competing visions, having to do reshoots to figure out how to make the love story work, having to recut all the air fights. It was a beloved film. It's still an incredibly entertaining film. It works. All the things about it that you can objectively be like, this was awkward, that was strange, wait, that's a reshoot. Do these quite fit? Don't really matter at the end of the day, because the movie tells a story where you care about the characters and you care about the payoff. I mean, even the structure of the story is very odd. It's very much a movie that has two clear bookends to it, where we're on this aircraft carrier with a certain crew of people, and then we tell the whole story that follows that, but then you have to have a third act. You have to have your big final showdown, and so then all of a sudden we have that at the end of the film, where we got to go save the day, and so you get the final, but it's just a bookend to everything else. It's not like we're building towards that throughout the whole film. It's not like we care about who these villains are. It's very ill-defined who the villains are. We just get our final battle. That's kind of awkward and clunky. It shouldn't work. It's not the best way to do things. If I wrote it, if I was directing it, I would have done some things different there. But I wouldn't have made a movie as good. And that's the charm, the magic of this film, that despite its flaws, it works on every level that actually matters. That's what's interesting about movies. Sometimes it's tough to identify what exactly it is. Why does this one work and that one doesn't? This one breaks all the rules. This one has a lot of issues, but it works. And that one did everything right, and it's totally generic. At the end of the day, Top Gun is a 80s classic. Is it an all-time classic? I'm not so sure about that. Is it one of the best of the 80s? Absolutely it is. Is it a movie that just connected with people in a special way? Yeah, absolutely it is. Did it have great characters? Absolutely it did. Did it have, I keep wanting to say space battles. They are not space battles. Does it have jet battles that are the jet battles that we have? Absolutely it does. So everything that really mattered works, despite having a bunch of things that don't work about it. So how do you score that? I'm not quite sure, but I gotta give it a score anyway. Overall, I'll give this one an A-. On the entertainment scale, I'm gonna go 9.5. This is just a movie that I absolutely love and have seen a bazillion times and can watch it a bazillion times again. And I gotta say, of course, this is a must-see movie. If you haven't seen Top Gun, why did you watch this review? Go watch Top Gun, then watch this review. And especially if you're new to the world of Top Gun, if you're younger, didn't grow up watching it, what do you think about Top Gun? How does it play for you as someone that's, I don't know, under the age of 25? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I love the movie. It's got some faults. It's not an actual, legitimate masterpiece that's timeless. But I do think it's an incredible 80s product that works as that. For people that like that kind of thing, it's a great one of those, an incredibly entertaining film that, as I said, I can rewatch on loop over and over again. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.